If you like our content about training, then you'll love our programming too. Head to the notes below to grab a free week of general physical preparation. You get unlimited access to me and fresh programming every single week for less than $1 a day.
Welcome to another episode of the Hyperformance podcast, here with my usual co-host, Jacob. Shout out to the mosquito. Also joined today by our esteemed guest, who I was just explaining that this wasn't actually a diversity slot. But then as I was explaining it, I was like, oh, wait, well, it kind of is like what pushed me over the line to finally book Anna into the show. Because like we've been looking for more female guests, but my contention is that I thought we were in a male-dominated industry. And I didn't want to get Anna on because I was like, oh, I'm just biased because I've mentored her. But I'm like, no, wait, that's even more reason to get her on. Because I do love that. Anyway, welcome to the show.
Here in the name of tokenism. You're welcome.
Well, that's it. Now to stick to it, I just have to not get any more women on the show for the rest of the year to be like, Anna, she's the one.
That's perfect. I think that's how we should do D&I going forward. Just do it once and do it right.
I can't remember the lady that made the comment because she did put it pretty eloquently. And like, I'm making it about me. She was just sort of talking about her frustration. I think she really enjoyed, I think she was entertained by the debate between me and Atlas. But then like she said, she was like, I don't even want female guests. It frustrates me that we haven't even got to the point with, I guess, like the mean female conversations. Well, they're only even just starting to be had, let alone having nuanced conversations about women's training and stuff like that. Should we get into this before we let you introduce yourself? Or is this just too much of, because I feel like you have your own thoughts to this that we'll naturally get to.
Just keep going. We're in the rabbit hole. Swim in the rabbit hole. Keep going.
Well, because I look at you as an emerging leader, not even in women, like in fitness, but you are a woman. Like that's part of your identity, I assume. So how do you feel about all this?
Well, I mean, to be fair, when she tagged me, I actually had to go and look up who she was because I hadn't stumbled across her account before. And for the audience context, this has come up because you had a debate, right? I don't actually know why she was inspired to do this, but like it was a whole string of commentary about like there aren't enough female voices in the fitness industry, and those that exist are not very loud because either they don't have the same following, or the accounts that are really big fitness leaders that are women are like they're not the influences that we would like to see in the industry. It's
because when you say that, we already have an idea in our head. It's not high performance training. It's discount codes for stitching your bum tights. It's trying to flog a weird form of female specific protein powder. That's the stereotypes that come to mind.
Yeah. So I think she was just pointing out that she was like, no, there are decent accounts that exist. We're just kind of looking at these other people who are not necessarily they're not contributing to the overall messaging and development of the industry. So I think that was my interpretation of what she was saying based on the accounts that she tagged, and I was grateful to be on that list. But I mean, yeah, do I agree with her? Yeah, I guess so. I can't say that I've like sat around thinking about it in that sense because I never just took a feminism lens to the industry. I was just trying to do my thing, No,
because I was curious about that. Like, because I feel like when I look at you, and I've sort of seen a bit of the behind the scenes of your journey, I look at you as someone who's successful. And like you haven't had the experience in the fitness industry as a male. So I guess you can't really compare it to anything else. But like, yeah, like do you feel like you have busted through glass ceilings, objectively speaking. But did you have a feeling of going through that? Or is it just sort of something where like after the fact, you're like, in spite of all of this, I've done pretty well?
I mean, yeah, like as you said.
Because you're talented, so you can't really like negate that. Like,
I think the occasions where it's like been a thing in my mind has only ever been in response to a post where people have been like, this is hypersexualized or something like that, when it just absolutely was not intended to be. And the post that I'm thinking of as I say that is I filmed one of my workouts for the CrossFit Open. And I set my camera up before I actually knew where we were going to be for the workout. And I set my camera up. You're remembering it as I say this.
I can imagine though. Yeah, like I've been around gyms enough, and
yeah, like you know what it was. And what it ended up like, we faced I thought we were going to face sideways, and we basically turned 90 degrees. So the shot that we got was basically just like this moving shot of my gooch doing burpees. And the amount of comments that I got on that post, and like in my mind, I was just like, oh, well, I can count my reps in this video. Like it didn't even occur to me in the moment that I filmed it that it could be sexualized until the comment section popped up. And I was like, oh yeah, men exist. Fuck. And everyone was like, because I just did a video about like how to do your 21 or what was it, 24.1 faster or something. Like it was just like dumb, easy content that I made while I was walking home from the gym. And that was one of those things where it was like, if this were a male account, people would have been like, dumb angle, but they wouldn't have been like, oh my God, you're doing it for attention. Like the messaging was very specific to the fact that I'm a woman with my gooch out. Like it just wasn't, you know what I mean? Like there's things like that where I've been like, damn, it would be easier in this scenario if I was just a dude, but it's been,
did that go like ultra viral, that one?
Or I can't remember, but I know it did over 500K. Like it did a fair bit.
Damn. Yeah.
So obviously the viewership's gone up. If that's not considered going viral.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. What is the level for viral these days? What do we count?
No, I know what you mean, because it's almost like if you got to be like hot to a girl to be considered viral these days. But going down this, I really apologize if any of this line of questioning makes you uncomfortable. Just we can skip over it, but I'd appreciate your openness on this topic. What are your thoughts then if you got to be sexualized regardless, just because you're female and you happen to be in pretty good shape as well? And like, because my thoughts on it, because I give people social media advice, like trying to drive e-commerce sales and things like that, and end up giving and I'm always torn with that because I haven't had to face that decision where I like either can lean into it or it's going to happen to me, even if I seemingly put up resistance to it. And this is something that Stephanie Cohen sort of started a bit of a public conversation with, because she's someone who I would regard was taken very seriously by everyone who had their shit together. They knew that she was a world record holding powerlifter. She was a beast of an athlete, but then she did sort of go on this trajectory of deliberately leaning into it. And I'm sure it sort of changed the ratio of her interaction to the type of sales that she was getting. And the reason why I typically advise women to be cautious of it potentially is, are you capable of monetizing those followers? Just looking at things from fuck how you feel about it on a personal value system level, just the economic side of it. But like, you're a high performance coach and you're a beast. So like, even if a guy follows you because he mistakes one of your posts for a thirst trap, you can probably sell him a program down the line. I'm aware that there's still potential barriers. I saw you smirk. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I think your point about monetization is like, if I were to be communicating with coaches in the industry, that would be the thing that I would say. I was like, you know, it's your personal choice how much you want to sexualize yourself, but just know that being hypersexualized on the internet doesn't necessarily lead to the right kind of followers, the right kind of sales. It's not always going to lead to the right audience interactions. If you want to do that to some degree for more exposure and more growth, I mean, girl, do your thing. But I would say that that creates a delineation between what I think of in my mind as opt-in feminists and opt-out feminists, which is like, if you're an opt-out feminist, you see the game and you reject the game because you're like, the whole way that our world is set up is based on a patriarchy. I don't want to be part of it. I'm not shaving my armpits, and I'm, you know, like that's your opt-out feminist. And then you've got your opt-in feminist, and I would put myself in that bucket where it's like, I'm going to get my eyebrows microbladed to look a little bit hotter, and I'm going to wear clothes that look better because I do care about what other people think to that degree. And I'm also going to try to be like an actual thought leader instead of just a, you know, body on the internet. So I think like you can recognize the game as the game that it is. You can choose to play it to a certain degree and just know where your own barriers are, or what am I trying to say? Like what you're willing to deal with in terms of opting into the game, and then knowing how much of that is actually useful to you in terms of monetization. I don't have any interest in being an opt-out feminist because that's a very hard way to live your life. You're like accepting that you're never going to be part of society in the way that it's currently run.
It's a lot of sacrifice. Yeah, hell yeah. Because you have to play the game, or it's like, because you can be utopian. It's like, oh, society's progressing, but then you have to be honest about that rate of progression and how comfortable it can be to be at the forefront of that publicly
Yeah,
and
exactly.
representatively, maybe against your will slightly. Or like you said, it's so vague how much of it you're in control of and to what degree
Yes.
it's intentional.
Especially if you're constantly interacting with people who A, have never even thought about the game, like most men, I would say, or B, don't know that they're playing the game. They don't see the board at all. Like they don't really understand how feminism works or like what the patriarchy even really is and represents. So I'm just kind of like, I'm just going to do my thing, and it's going to be somewhat interrupted by the fact that this is the space, but whatever, I'll manage it, I guess. I don't know. Maybe that's the really lazy answer, but I just don't see it. Like the only other way to do it is to ostracize yourself, and that seems hard.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't know what to fucking do either.
If you're sick of going goblin mode on the same 4 accessory exercises at the end of every single session, head to the notes below and grab our free gymnastics program. It'll change the way you think about accessories forever.
What was your first fucking sport? When did you realize you wanted to become a personal trainer?
Oh, those are 2 very different questions. Which one do you want?
Go to sport first. Just tell us your life story.
My first sports, I don't actually know which one I did first, but I played soccer when I was a little kid, and I did some gymnastics, but I didn't do gymnastics for very long. But I played soccer pretty consistently for most of my youth, and then I went back to gymnastics when I was a teenager. So I was a bit like out of shape and a little bit overweight compared to the others, and substantially weaker, and like just like didn't really know what I was doing. So I just went back for funsies, and that was my youth basically. I played soccer every year. I wasn't very good. It was like club level, very recreational, and then dabbling in gymnastics. That's
nice.
it.
And then how'd you sort of fall into the fitness industry? Just through your own passion for training, like the classic failed athlete story, or what was that like? Because you were a personal trainer straight up at the start, right? Like, do you still look at yourself as a personal trainer?
Yeah, I still don't really know what to tell people when they ask me at a party what I do for a living or something like that. Like that situation, I'm like, I don't know. I do cartwheels on the internet. So no, I mean, I didn't go straight into it. I actually thought I was going to work in like the business side of healthcare. I moved to New Zealand trying to do a med degree, and didn't get into medicine, and then moved into like business, and my undergrad was in human physiology and marketing and management, because I was like, oh, I'll work in pharma or something like that. But then I realized very quickly after doing an internship that I didn't like business, and I didn't like being at a desk, and I didn't like basically anything that came with that world. So I started PTing on the side just because I liked the gym, and because I met a trainer who I was like, oh, you don't suck. Like I just met someone who I was like, this is a representation of what this world looks like that I haven't seen before. This seems fun. I could do this as like a second job. And I really thought it was just going to be like a job hobby. And then it was like a few months into PT
This is
school.
everything that I want to be. Like what you just described there, that when you make someone realize like, yeah, this whole thing doesn't actually fucking stink.
Yeah, it was that. It was literally just
met those people, and yeah, it's just so exciting.
Yeah. It is good. So that was it. And then I basically quit my corporate job as soon as I could afford to do so, which was about seven months after I started.
So you didn't jump all in, because this is another thing because I deal with a lot of people who are curious about entering into the industry. I'm always just like, oh, fuck's sake. Typically my bias is to encourage them to just jump off the boat, because I have this belief that they'll never actually manage to get the fitness thing off the ground. What was that like for you, trying to balance both of those things? Was it pretty quick that you got some traction and some stability with the job in fitness, or was there a long time circling the corporate drain?
Yes and no. So I started in February 2020, which obviously was right before the first lockdown, and I was in New Zealand, in Auckland. So we really locked down, like we Melbourne level locked down. So, I mean, no, I wouldn't say I got immediate awesome traction. But the thing that I did have to do was, in that first stretch of time, I had to figure out how to do stuff online with the client base that I already had from those few weeks of PTing before we went into our first lockdown. So I've been online since pretty much like not day one, but almost day one.
Which is a bit of a meme, whereas you were sort of forced into it. Like you tried to do face-to-face first, but you just only got 4 weeks of it before we went into the biggest global lockdown ever.
Yeah.
And then everyone's like, these fucking online coaches, fuck, if you haven't done 5,000 face-to-face sessions, get out of my face. Don't do a post.
Yeah. And like, to be fair, I think if I hadn't done a lot of the in-person stuff, I'd be pretty trash at online. So the combination of exposures was important, but it was incidental, or it was an environmental push, not so much like a wanting to just go online so that I could work in Bali. Like, it wasn't that. So I kept my corporate job, and I would go to the gym in the morning, PT a couple of clients, go to job, go train myself at lunch, go back to job, and then go to PT again in the evening. So I basically worked morning and evening slots. So I just worked like quite long days for I think I did that 4 days a week, and then I gave myself Friday evenings off. And I was just rooted by the end of that kind of week. And then I would go back on Saturday mornings and train a couple clients as well.
How long was that?
How burnt out you are when I met you. I'm just remembering now. You weren't this long.
Yeah. It was, because we met in early 2022. And then that year was rough. We don't talk about that year. It didn't happen. We can talk about that year. But I was pretty smoked after that. And then I left my corporate job in August that year. So it was right before we went into our next big lockdown. It was such a mess. I did all the things wrong. But my decision point was based on revenue. So I was like, once my PT business is basically allowing me to pay my bills, I was like, I don't have to save at the rate that I'm saving money from my corporate job, but I do have to be able to meet my gym rent and pay my own expenses. And I did that by, I guess it would have been like late July or August. So by that point I was like earning. This was in 2020. It was like within 8 months within 6 months. Yeah.
That's such a solid transition then, especially with the logistics that you faced.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that was both a gift and a curse, right? Because the gift was, it was like, figure it out. But the curse was, it was fucking rough at first. And I think I couldn't have done it if my corporate job hadn't been as like stupid as it was. Like, I was so excess to need. I was able to get away with, like, I showed up to work early. Like, I probably was there for 38 hours a week, but I wouldn't have been there for the 40 on my contract. You know what I mean? Like, it was probably, I was on the nose for a few things.
A little bit of luck of circumstances. But then it seemed to me, because especially when you came through the mentorship, like, there was a huge nutrition part to your business as well. And like, you've pivoted so many times and like built this thing out to now, because we've had so many conversations about like changing your content strategy, you know, versus like things that you're passionate about versus things that we're looking at other businesses around us, like models that we can emulate to be successful and stuff like that. And one of the things that I've just had a lot of pride in watching you do is be authentic about the kind of stuff that you want to put out. And I'm not sure if this is what it was in your head, but from my perspective, it sort of just looked like over time you kept testing pieces of content that you wanted to talk about, like whether it be training, whether it be gymnastics, whether it be CrossFit, or whether it was just be nutrition for athletes, or whether it's about female fitness stuff. And you just built trust with all those different topics over time. And you were able to do that because all those topics were meaningful to you. And you just, I don't know, had like a long game perspective with it. So what are your thoughts in terms of like, what are you trying to put out there and how has that changed over time? What was the early sort of content creation like? Because that's awesome shit.
Yeah, fair question. I mean, I think when we first chatted, actually not during the mentorship, because we did the mentorship early 2022, and then I went off grid for a few months and came back at the end of the year. And that conversation that we had then was sort of like, I need to do content now. Like, I'm making the decision that I'm going to do this every day, if it kills me or not, kind of thing. And that was when we started leaning more into gymnastics. And in part, like, this is I can't remember, there's a name to this effect, but it's basically like content creators feed what they get back from people. So I did a bunch of CrossFit content. I did some kettlebell stuff. I even did some like weightlifting stuff in the early days. I did a bunch of random nutrition things, including fat loss and things like that. I never talk about fat loss anymore because I just find it so boring. But the things that stuck was the gymnastics ones. Like, I remember the first reel that went viral. It was like 1 million views or something like that. And it was just some dumb thing on handstand walks. Like, it was so incredibly Like it was like the most dumb content I had made to that point. And I was like, oh, people just want these simple concepts explained to them in the lowest common denominator format. And that was what I leaned into. And you and I had a conversation.
It's the same as life, right? Like now hearing your thoughts on all that other stuff, you're like, do I want to play this game? Because my issue, all the trainers who don't want to make content, people don't want to hear the nuance. It's like, they fucking do. Look at Anna's content. You just have to give them a bit of what they want. Occasionally, it's like, yeah, here's some fucking dopamine. I'll package it up with some awesome information. You have to like take some fucking responsibility for it. People are like, why doesn't anyone want to read my fucking dissertation on Instagram? It's like, you failed in academia. You're there. You're on socials. The medium is the message. That's what I was trying to say. Well, and
also like the perfect example of that is Alec Blennis. How many followers does Alec have? And he does all the nuance. And I'm like, yeah, but he writes well. He writes well. He puts in memes. He's engaging. Yeah. He seems like a nice guy. Like he's built up a persona that works to deliver that level of information. And I think that's what it is. So now within that same strategy, like obviously at that time I kind of started leaning into the gymnastics and that was just fun. Like I liked doing it more than I liked the other stuff. But now I'm like, there are posts that I do that I'm like, this is a low IQ post and I'm doing it because it's easy to make. It's going to get some engagement, whatever. Is it the best thing I've ever said about anything? No, it's stupid, but that's okay because that's going to bring people into my page and then they're going to go and find some high IQ posts. And I'll make sure that I have a balance of those things in the week. And I'll try not to let myself get too lazy and do a bunch of low IQ stuff. And I'll try not to waste too much time doing a bunch of high IQ stuff. And that's literally how I make my content now. I'm like, meme, can I do that in 15 minutes? Yes, let's do a meme today.
I really love that because like something that we had to work on, like my view of short form content is you need to be posting daily. And the reaction that I get whenever I say that is just people look so sad and depressed. They're like, this is going to fucking ruin my life. And I think you are someone who has very much just developed a creative muscle. Well, I'd be curious to see if you identify as a more creative person after dedicating yourself to content creation for a couple of years. But you just sort of spelled out there, you have a framework for developing different content ideas. So you're just not like, oh, I got to do an Instagram post today. Or sorry, that's the start of the process. But then there's a second tier for you where you're like, oh, am I just doing something attention grabby today? Am I doing something a little bit vapid? Am I going to do something a little bit nuanced? And then is it going to come from then there's this other framework, I guess you shift over to where it's like, is it CrossFit based or it's probably not like that sort of process, but can you talk about like how you see your content framework?
Yeah, and I actually have them quite clearly written down. So if it's...
Oh, so you physically?
Yes.
Hectic.
Your audience is largely trainers, right? Like coaches.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to explain
and
this.
They all want to do. They want to do what you're doing. Everyone's trying to do this.
Okay. So here's the thing. There are 3 days that I have touch points on content creation. I have a ideation day, I have a assimilation day, and then I have a creation day. They are separate processes, so they are separate days. The ideation day, all I have to do is big brain things, and I refer to 3 different pages I have in Notion. One of them is a page full of memes. Another one is just literally a grid of everything that I ever have talked about, which ones have been successful, and what ideas are like things that I go into, and that includes my brand pillars, my content strategy, and everything that I could possibly say from my own lens. So I can go back to that. If I'm having a bad day where I don't feel creative, I can go back and be like, fuck, what have I not said in a while? Athletes don't eat enough carbs. I can make a post about that. Sweet. And like, how many 100 posts have I made about that? I don't know. It's dumb. But I just repackage it, put it out in another way. So if I'm having a bad time, I can go back to those matrices and be like, sweet, how can I assimilate 3 of these things that I've never said in that method before? So that happens on ideation day. Assimilation day is when I curate how the message is going to be. I talk about like, what clips am I going to use? What's the messaging of the thing? What's the caption? What's this? It's got to be that. And then on Tuesdays, I sit there and I bang out 6 to 8 posts, depending on how often in a week I'm posting at that time. And I make them happen and I tidy them all up and they go out into a little bow. And sometimes they get scheduled into Meta and sometimes they just go into the drafts folder on Instagram. And then I just hit go in the morning. But it happens in stages. And if it doesn't happen like that, my brain falls apart and I melt down.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, right, you're not just, I mean, you can just like wake up every day about, let me just try to like pluck an idea out of thin air. You can have a go if you're that dedicated. And I know it wasn't just as simple as sitting down and mapping out this framework and getting to it. Like there would have been so many hours in distilling this actual process. But now, how many hours a week is pure content creation? Like how many hours per week is that process? If you were constrained, because maybe you lean into it and enjoy yourself there now a bit, but.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I lean in or enjoy it, but I get it done. And I would say it probably costs me 7 to 9 hours, depending on the week.
Yeah. It's not that fucking hard. Like, sorry, it's hard when it's hard when you got 50 or 60 clients and you got family and you haven't started it, because you do just have to start with this commitment to the process. The same way you started with a commitment to figuring out how to fucking train people. If you want to have an online presence, you just have to take it fucking seriously, which you did. You took it seriously. I feel like you applied the same shit that you apply to training and lifting. Do you agree with that? Like,
yeah, like I think I did 2 things. I tried to systematize as early as possible because I know how anxious I get if there are no systems in place. And that was a big thing for me, was being like, I'm not good at creativity. I find this really hard. I feel like I'm pushing shit uphill. How am I going to facilitate those things for myself? Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest pieces of that was breaking up the process into smaller chunks and being clear about what part of the brain I'm using for each of those processes. And then the second thing was like looking back and reviewing my content and auditing it for success or lack of success.
Because when you've done enough, the data is there.
It's fucking there. And part of it is just committing to being good at communication and being like, oh man, I was way too wordy with that. Oh, I buried the lead. Oh, I don't know. The clips in the beginning were really static. I needed to change camera angle a couple of times for the dum-dums to pay attention for the whole 10 seconds of this reel. Like, it's literally just those things and being like, cool, what worked, what didn't work. And sometimes other people will be able to tell you, but you have to audit your own content. If you do not audit your own content, you will keep producing the same mid-tier thing. And I can think of 2 accounts, and one of them is surprisingly large for the content that they create, and they have failed consistently to learn, and their brand colors are still shit. It's completely unrecognizable. It's wordy. They're trying to put PMIDs into every page, which works for some people. Like Aiden Muir does that well, but it's just garbage content. And with literally a process of like 5 questions, if they ask the same 5 questions of every post, they'd be able to improve their content within 3 to 5 months, but they refuse.
You have to be trying to entertain people first and foremost. And you can bring whatever you want with you, as long as you are first and foremost, because it's like, it just doesn't matter what you're trying to fucking package up. And I feel for our people listening, this has been a topic for a couple of weeks. I probably sound like a broken record, but I'm so glad to have people like you come on and explain that. It's like, I'm not just full of fucking ideas naturally. I put in effort. Here is this tangible process that I go through. Like, there's subjective components and there's luck that's involved with this. But to get lucky, you must be playing the fucking game. And you're playing the game and you're netting wins on a daily fucking basis. And because this is the thing as well, what can you say about what has built your business in your opinion? Is it going viral?
No.
Or is it just, really?
But actually, there's probably one more thing that I would say about content creation, generally speaking, just because I know it might be useful to coaches who are listening. And one of the things that my partner took me through that was a helpful thing. Oh, you've met Naveed, haven't you? Have you met Naveed?
Yeah, I feel like I've just seen him in the background of enough stuff that I have a social relationship with him.
You know enough of each other. Anyway, he took me through character archetypes, and he was showing me different archetypes of who is who in the fitness industry. He was like, Eugene Teo, well-known name. He is a sage archetype. He has always consistently done informative content, and his brand is like mellow, calm, cool guy. When you meet him, he's a lot more wild card than that. But like, that's his persona on the internet, right? Is he's like just a knowledgeable, lovely person. So you follow Eugene because you want information. You follow, booty bitch and the scrunch bum shorts for the hero archetype. You're like, I want to be her. She's a success story. Think of like maybe like a Jimmy House type character. Equal hero archetype where everyone is following them because they're like, I want to be you. I wish I could do that backflip in my bedroom. I wish I could. Like, anything that starts with I wish I could, that's a hero archetype. Then you've got like the jester. You're probably a jester. Austin, you're a jester. Who else is a jester? I don't know. There's enough accounts, like any meme fitness account, physio, meme, whatever the fuck he is. No bullshit physio.
No bullshit.
you're somewhere between like a sage and a jester, right? So you can do both. But you need to know where you sit, because every post you do should go through the lens of, is this appropriate for my character archetype? And if it fails to meet that criteria, you're not being consistent in your messaging, and people will not know what to look for when they go to your brand.
Yeah.
Most trainers are trying to be a sage, but they need a second archetype to either lift it up and be funnier or be more inspirational or be more something, because if you're just information, you're boring and people don't like it. You need another flavor of something.
Yeah. Sorry, Jacob, I know I would shut up, but Anna's just touching on so many good aspects that are just at the core of the principles of good content creation, especially short form content creation. Because I talk about just pacing, and even you were like, because I always say to people, like, just within the first 3 seconds, I need to see more than one thing. But the fact that you were like, and I'll usually say like, have a bit of text come up or switch to a different clip, but you're like, no, just a different angle or zoom on the same. It's like, anything, because even in pop music, this is the thing, people like pop music's repetitive. I'm like, yes, it is repetitive. It'll go like verse, chorus, bridge, and then a double chorus. But in the second verse, they'll have like a one just belt that just gets hit one time, and it doesn't show up any other part in the song. And it's literally just to make you be like, what the fuck was that? What's changing? Oh no, we're still in this first thing that I like. But it's like, just, and it's the same as food, just keeps getting more processed and more, and you can fucking complain about it. And it is a problem. I agree with that. But you have to understand attention. And just honing in on that. But and like I said, you have content that does get into the nuance. And like I said, you grab their attention. Like, I'm not even asking questions at this point. Jacob, back to you.
Just going off that. So just another barrier I feel like some coaches get into is like, am I strong enough? Am I doing cool enough shit? Am I lifting X amount of weight? Do I look a certain way? How do you see, as well as going through your archetypal sort of model, how do you see younger trainers sort of overcoming that fear of putting content out there without having all that all sorted out yet?
I think that's a really valid point, because a lot of people do feel that way, right? They're like, I'm not X enough for my message to matter. But I don't think that that's what people are looking for. They're not looking for the hottest trainer. They're not looking for the smartest. They're not looking for the whateverist. They're looking for someone they identify with. So they are looking for who looks like me, who thinks like me, who's going to give me the message that I want to see. And like, I was lucky that I stumbled into a relatively niche space that has cool looking movements, right? Like, people stop to look at a bar muscle up because they're like, ooh, what's that? So I probably have had people stop and view my things just because they're like, ooh, random thing. But you can still do it in the fitness space by just being someone that people want to talk to. Like, if you pass the would I get a beer with you test, people will listen to you. And second, being effective in your communication. If you're bad at comms, people won't listen. So just tighten up your messaging. Just get really good, practice a lot at being like, what is the shortest way I can say this? And then allow myself to expand. And you'll notice it. Like, I can think of a couple of other people who I've worked with, and like in like a collab type setting. And the thing that they tend to be the worst at is like, they'll bury the lead. They'll put it at like the end of 40 seconds of talking. And I'm like, no, bring it up front. Bottom line,
smelling
up front.
their own farts.
Well, and this is the thing, is that their worry is they're like, but I haven't given enough context. And I'm like, well, you've given no message. You haven't given them a reason to stay for the context. You have to put the bottom line up front, then provide the context, because you have to earn the context or they're not listening. And the people who aren't going to stay for the context are idiots anyway. Whatever, they've at least contributed to the viewership on that thing. And the people who are interested in the context are going to stick around for the extra 32 seconds of messaging. And you don't need to worry about the idiots who didn't finish it, because they're not going to buy from you either way.
Yeah. Do you think about how big can my page get? No, this is a fallacy I've cooked up in my head, because there's definitely pages way bigger than mine that talk about nuanced information. I had this thing in my head. I was like, how many smart people are out there in the fitness industry? We're already down to a handful of people. And I was like, over time, because I have ambitions, I want to grow this thing to be like bigger than functional patterns and like ATG and stuff. And I guess, sorry, the polite way to talk about it is just through like communication. Like, can I still distill this messaging down to something that can be interpreted, that can be understood by someone who hasn't even finished high school, that education level. I guess I
Go
just need to take
read.
that challenge on more.
Who wrote that? They're Axios. Who wrote the Axios hand guide? What's his name? I can't remember.
What the fuck is that? That sounds like some deep shit.
No, it's really easy reading, but it's oh fuck, I wish I could remember the name. I can't. But if you Google Axios and then you look for book titles, the guy that founded Axios, which is an American news outlet, they were founded essentially to communicate to executive like business people what's happening in the political world. So their whole thing is, if I can't explain this in like 5 sentences, it doesn't fucking matter because they haven't read it anyway. So their whole method is basically like bottom line up front, little bit of context, couple of lines to like make people interested in the context. They literally provide the structure for how to write this way that people will listen to. And that is for longer form writing than we have to do. So it's even simpler for us because you literally just have to be like, here's the message in 1 sentence, and then pray that they'll stick around for long enough to hear why it works.
Yeah.
Like if you even listen to Donald Trump in interviews, like, sorry to get a bit political.
It's a powerful communicator. That's a great example.
But in private interviews, he sounds so technical and he actually sounds really smart. But like when he's talking to the populace, he's like dumbs it way down. So yeah, I guess we're in an industry where it's sort of like it is technical in a sense, but the whole skill of it comes down to just explaining it like it's 5-year-old, like that Reddit thing says. So. Yeah, I think some young trainers get a bit caught up because they come straight from the books and they're like, fuck, I have to unlearn this and then relearn this again. So
they're also trying to seem smart. Whereas like once you get to like 30, you're just trying to show people your personality again.
Well,
I think that's like a new grad thing.
It is. And it's also just like a young person thing, right? Like you spend your like late teens, early 20s trying to figure out who you are and what you're supposed to represent. And so there's a lot of peacocking to be done. But I think one of the things that helped me in terms of that space was being like, instead of valuing the opinions of everyone, let's choose 5 people who actually do give a shit about how they perceive this. And don't choose people who use the same language as you, like, because you have to be able to communicate it effectively. So if you're not going to, like, if you wouldn't go to someone for advice, don't take their criticism, whether or not you've actually heard them say, like, give you any criticism. If you've made up their criticism in your mind, it's irrelevant. Like, just pick a few people that you're like, would they be interested in this? Would they, like, and it doesn't even have to be your brand archetype people. It can literally just be like your mate who you think is smart. That's fine. If that's going to get you over the hump of like the insecurity of posting, which we all have, I still have it sometimes, but you just kind of have to be like, oh, well, it's pain. Just deal with it.
At least you're getting, you can't complain anymore. You should be getting enough validation from the algorithm.
I don't actually even check it.
Give you a buzz. Yeah,
No,
right. Okay, yeah, fair.
I used to, like, probably until beginning of this year, I was still checking it and trying to chase those numbers and stuff. And now I'm just like, I don't care. If you don't like it, deal with it.
More input focused. Yeah. Need to get more like that. Yeah.
I'm happy to hear you say that, but I still think that earlier in the day, because you understand the process now, and I think you're self-aware enough to vet it, and you're just trying to like emotionally regulate and not be tied to it like that. And I think that's a very much more sustainable strategy. But yeah, and that's a summary of like what I don't think I expressed well before when I was trying to describe Anna's content. It was that, because whenever I'm telling people to be authentic, I'm like, yeah, but don't make shit content. It's got to be you filtered through that. But what is good content? Don't just be like, well, it's authentic for me to just go live and just sort of yap on a little bit. And be like, that's not, there are better parts of the authentic you that you can sell on Instagram. Find the bits of your authentic self that you can explain in 3 seconds. And then over time, as you build trust, then people will listen to you for longer.
Yeah. Like the authenticity should come across in the way that you use your words, not in the volume of words that you use.
Yeah.
Would you kind of relate it to like giving your own analogy through explaining topics to show like you've understand this, you've actually taken the time, like, oh, this is how your brain works. Is that what you guys both think, or?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of framing it. Like if you and I, Jacob, were to explain the same concept with no preconception of how we were each going to explain it, we would use a different analogy, right? So,
Yeah.
and that's our personality difference. That is the brand voice. You can just wrap it up at that. You don't have to be like trying to steal someone else's way of thinking. And I do think as well, one of the things that played in my favor in the early days is that I'm kind of strange. And so, like,
and a bit quirky, yeah.
yeah. So like I say things in a way that apparently I didn't know it at the time, but I've like learned through this process is different to what other coaches are saying. And there are definitely people that it does not work for. And they're very neurotypical people. Like it's fine. I've got the corner of the internet full of fun weirdos that I like. It's perfect.
Yeah, because that's it.
Relate.
There's so many people on the internet. Like now that there's so much, I don't know, monoculture is not the way to describe it because it's almost the opposite of that. I know that's one effect of the internet, but the other aspect is like there used to be like one weirdo in every town, but now they're all fucking connected through the internet. So it doesn't matter what your niche interest is. It's like, yeah, that's the niche. Just being yourself, not being like, I help mums of two get in the best shape of their life. I don't know. Apparently that still works. I talk to people who are like, no, that legit still fucking works, but it just makes me throw up in my mouth. I have to have an identity that what I'm doing is somewhat cool as well.
Yeah. I mean, my bio still looks like that, I think.
Does it?
I don't know. I don't actually know what it is. Pull it out. I don't know.
I'm pulling it up right now. You got to change that. I mean, don't, because it's funny now. Yeah. It's not that bad. It's that start. It's not like, I think you're missing a little bit because you're not giving them a timeline. So it'd be in 6 weeks. I help intermediate.
Oh, is this the bio? Is this the Instagram bio that all the business coaches
I help
use?
intermediate athletes RX their skills on nutrition in 6 weeks. It needs a little bit of it. To be the meme, it needs a little razzle-dazzle on the end. A time frame or some sort of connected to some other sort of emotion or a smart goal. Anyway.
I know an account that absolutely shits out students that just, you can just tell, oh, you've done that coach business mentorship. I could tell by your bio. It's like, where's the individual?
Yeah. And there's always like unnecessary demographic information in it as well. It's like, I help
so specific
2-year-old men in finance who are 6'5" with blue eyes, touch their toes after 48 minutes.
Oh, sorry. We've got to talk about fucking training because I've been on a huge gymnastics kick as well. And we need to talk about you also being a representative of the GPP community as well, because you're out there training variously. But still, I really look up to you when it comes to the gymnastics side of thing, and you specifically inspired me to make gymnastics a bigger part of my programming. I'm trying to land this into a question. But do you have any general thoughts? Like, why should people give a fuck about gymnastics if they're not a CrossFitter? I think that's a better question.
I was going to ask that same question.
And not a gymnast as well.
I think gymnastics provides a few unique training qualities that you don't see in other spaces. So one of those we could distill to just positional strength and positional awareness. So that might be like your straight arm pulling, your straight arm pushing. So that's stuff like your levers, your Maltese, your planche, whatever. Like those are positional things, or even like core compression. Those are positional things that don't come up in traditional S&C. You're not going to see a bunch of, I don't know, soccer players doing a pike core compression lift because it's irrelevant, or to them it feels irrelevant. So there are positional strength pieces that become low-hanging fruit that you can use to develop strength that you wouldn't have otherwise found. And then there's also just the fun of like having to manipulate yourself in space without external objects. So think about like an aerial, because you were working on aerials at one point. I can't remember when this was, but like you played around with it for a hot minute.
I'll be back. I just got swimming down by breaking my neck. Like I just.
But like an aerial is a weird thing if you are not someone who's had a gymnastics background, because you have to manipulate yourself in space and time with no reference to anything. You're in the air. And it's the same thing when you jump on a rig or on like a jump onto a bar or something like that. Is like you have to learn to manipulate yourself, and there's not a ball, there's not a bat, there's not a something else that you're
extraordinarily low ground. I never thought of that aspect of it even.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like only you. It's similar to dance or like
it's the opposite of like the 90-90 hip lift. Well, because you know how I talk about like that stuff. It's like you know where you are in fucking space. Like you can feel it. And then it's all of a sudden it's like hands, if that.
References everywhere.
Yes, exactly. So like you're either using really weird reference points like your hands, or you're using no reference points because you're in the air. So it's a weird thing that requires you to know where you are in space on a level that is replicated in few other sports. You could make an argument for martial arts. You can make an argument for dance. You can make some other arguments for like, I don't know, like I guess
because I think about, I was just having this idea about like, what do you get from just plyometrics that a lot of people with a purely strength training background don't understand? I was like, yeah, it's this relationship with understanding what to do with your body in the air. Because like for sure, there's this component of interacting with the ground, but the thing that separates strength-oriented people when they go out onto the track is they have no fucking clue what to do with themselves in the air. And it's almost a completely different thing, but the same in terms of understanding your body when it's flying through the air, just much more upper body, relatively speaking, oriented.
Yeah. And I would say that the ground with your feet is a much more familiar reference point to most people because we walk and run. So even though the plyometrics do ask you for a different movement, it's still something that you're like, yeah, but this makes sense to me because my feet.
And you're not upside down.
Yeah. So you're not adding all of the like, and even though the high velocity is there, like in gymnastics, there's high velocity and there's a rotational aspect. Like if you think about like Biles, obviously just did the triple double, like the amount of head movement that's happening there, and for her to still know where she is in space, that is fucking crazy. That is incredible.
Sensory organs going everywhere.
Exactly. And so like it doesn't matter how good you are at plyos, you're not replicating that level of spatial awareness.
Because I would consider surfers to have good proprioception and spatial awareness, and like a big thing in surfing right now is trying to land a 722 full rotations. And I'm just watching these guys, like they can do the rotations, they just get lost. A lot of them are over rotating. Because again, they're just like, well, no one's done one of these before, just rotate as high, but it's not that. It's like, it's this golf thing of like, you got to smack it, but you have to smack it perfect. Yeah, it's so hectic.
Yeah.
This is inspiring me I've conquered getting upside down. I need to now deal with some velocity. And do you think that a good way of exposing myself to getting over this fear of breaking my neck, and I know there's no guarantees, you got to take responsibility for yourself. Should I try to land a backflip before I go for an aerial, or is it the same?
No.
Good question.
Is it just to the side? Like,
I know. I wasn't saying transference of skills. I know one's like heaps more like frontal, probably not how gymnasts describe it, like going sideways. One's over the back, but just in terms of like getting over a fear of yeeting myself.
It's one of those unfortunate things that like really only comes with exposure. So the best way to reduce fear is like create as much padding and safety as you possibly can within the constraints of your gym environment.
We value your input here at the Hyperformance podcast. Head to the SpeakPipe link in the notes below and you can leave us a voicemail where you can ask us a question or leave us a topic for us to explore on the show. We hope to hear from you soon.
And then over time, you reduce the fear. So for example, let's just pretend this is a handstand context instead of a tumbling context. When I'm getting someone to overcome the fear of being upside down on their hands, they start with like basically going from a plank on a box to a pike on the box, where the position is that their hips are over their hands. In a true pike on box, people should feel fucking terrified if they've never been in that position. If they aren't feeling scared, they haven't stacked themselves. So they should need either like a spot or a wall or something, some other reference point to prevent them from falling over. And then you start taking them from like, cool, can you float from the box to the wall? And you might literally just go like stacked on the box and then hips touch the wall. So there's only like a millisecond in space before they transfer from the box to the wall where they're truly on their hands. And in that moment, some people will freak out and collapse down. So you just go as slow as that person needs to overcome the fear of the position. In a tumbling context, it's harder because you need a lot more padding to be able to do that, and your trajectory is going to influence how accurate that padding is going to be. But in the context of an aerial, I'd be like, cool, go find a sand pit, do it into a sand pit. Don't start with backflips because that's raising the bar higher in terms of both the cost of getting it wrong and the difficulty of the skill.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see so many morons doing backflips, but then again, I see a lot of like 10-year-old girls at the park throwing aerials.
Yeah, like the
So
hard part of
I
the
have a
aerial.
3-year-old niece. I'm not hanging at parks, just to clarify.
I didn't
Thanks for the
question it.
clarification, guys.
No, but and also just like chatting to girls at the gym, be like, oh, I'm trying to do an aerial, and they're like, oh, fuck, I haven't done one of those in 15 years. Let me see if I've still got it, and they'll just rip one.
Yeah. Yeah. But the flexibility component does help with an aerial. So if you're not very flexible, I can see why you'd be more tempted toward a backflip. I would just say, like, find someone who can spot you if you're going to do a backflip, because it's not technically difficult. Backflips are pretty easy.
I don't give a shit about a backflip. The aerial's really what I want, because that looks way cooler in my opinion. Backflip doesn't look, I mean, it's cool. It's a backflip, but
Flexibility in like the adductors, or
no, because when I see India from the gym, shout India Stewart, again, powerlifter, can still rip aerials, hasn't danced in, was dancing like 5 years ago, I guess. And that's what I notice about India is by the time her last leg has left the ground, her other leg's almost back on the fucking ground again. I mean, and she can do the full, and so I guess maybe that's it. Because I feel like I've got to have the power, and I am willing to throw myself into it.
The other
But I feel
option
like,
would
I
be
can't open up.
Or just go for a side summy instead of an aerial. Close the legs, tuck.
That sounds harder. Oh, not really, because you use both of them as a whip together. Okay.
Yeah, you need a little bit more height for a side summy, but you can also kind of like you can also kind of like leverage the throwing of the leg to get you over the top. And if you fuck it up, you I don't know, the fall doesn't suck.
Sounds much more up my alley. And if anything is going to be a potential progression outside of trying to do the thing, which is the A1 progression, I'll admit that. I need to start accepting that lesson that I already fucking know. Making the same mistake again and again. You just got to do the fucking thing. Anyway, speaking more towards the big gymnastics side of thing and integrating it into the whole art of general physical preparation, what are your favorite progressions to introduce people to that you feel like are good pathways? Well, that kind of just is the nature of gymnastics. What are your introductions to gymnastics for people who haven't done shit but are ambitious and want to do cool shit? And get some sort of secondary training effect, because that's a big part of what I like about it. That almost feels built.
You want a why for it, right? A lot of the stuff that I would do would just be starting on the floor. So things like doing a true bear crawl with your knees really close to the ground, staying protracted, is actually pretty hard for most people. They will immediately sink into a retracted position. So asking them to stay protracted, they're going to be like, oh, that's impossible. And then eventually they'll figure out that they were just weak. So that's like a pretty easy low-hanging fruit one. Something like a straddle drag. So like feet in a straddle, hands out in the front, and then you have to rock your hips over the hands for the feet to be light enough to kind of drag their way across the floor. Any beginner is going to be able to do a variation of that. They're going to suck. They're going to turn it into a hop, but they'll be able to start seeing how shifting weight through the hands and changing the positioning of their body from their feet to their hands impacts the movement that they put themselves into. That's like the beginning to me of how you understand a press to handstand. So that, I mean, that's just like two things on the floor that pop into my head. A couple of things that you might do on the rig. Have you seen me do those ones where I'm hanging onto the bar and I've got a box in front of my feet and I slide my toes up
in the GPP program as a kid, because I've always sucked. I just have a weak up. I just haven't put in the practice, and I do have a weak upper body, but that was very helpful. Just having being able to use my lower body. Because again, I can't use my lower body without tactile feedback. I really struggle to stiffen my core, and because the legs are sort of pendulum. I don't know. Anyway, cannot control that shit whatsoever. The box was the first feeling I ever had to a good hollow position, somewhat in the air.
Yeah, and like if you're working toward a good hollow position using a band,
is the band at the back the progression? Because I saw you doing that. You had a band and you were protracting the back of your rib cage through it almost.
On the floor?
No, I'm pretty sure you were hanging.
Is we rebounding
and pushing yourself into a hollow with a band behind you.
That's a kip swing movement. So yeah, that's how I teach people to keep the hollow position in a kip swing, is like putting the band at basically bra strap height. No, the thing that's hard about that is
Gotcha.
maintaining the rhythm, because the band throws you out of the rhythm that you're used to using. And the objective is to push the band further back because it forces people, as you said, to retract the rib cage into the band. Whereas usually when they do a hollow body swing, they will just pike at the hips and they won't actually retract the rib cage. So you're asking them to like essentially push the band so they get that feedback of the rib cage retraction.
You know how we talk about perfect form, and like, or at least my thoughts on it in the weight room is I will try to perturb their form with load or constraints until I see a breakdown. And I'm like, a little bit of a breakdown, not complete form breakdown. Like, this feels like a good area in terms of technique development to work in, where I'm challenging it enough to see some form breakdown. My perception of gymnastics is that there's a much tighter threshold that a lot of the people who I know are gymnastics heads, when they DM me whenever I upload like a handstand or me practicing my shit, I feel like their perception is I'm not strict enough with my form and I'll never progress. Is this a strength training bias that I'm leaning into? Like, do you think generally, because the way you're describing it makes me maybe think that, because there's such a proprioceptive component to it and the positions are so different to strength training. Do you think there is a unique threshold for strictness in your gymnastics? Or can you be sloppy like me and just stay dedicated and try to get better over time? You know how I really let it get sloppy.
I think it's somewhere between your perception of what is required and theirs. I think that most gymnasts come from a gymnastics community, right? Where prettiness gets you points. And I think that leads to a culture that only accepts perfection in the positions to a point beyond which it is effective, right? Like, if I can do a back handspring that puts me in a position to follow it with a nice backflip, then it was a good enough back handspring. But if my toes weren't pointed and my knees were slightly bent, in gymnastics, it wasn't good enough and you need to keep doing your back handspring. And I see this in CrossFit all the time, where people will be like, oh, their ring muscle up looks a little bit ugly, they need to do more hollow body holds. And then you ask that person to do a hollow body hold and they can hold 60 seconds in a perfect position. And I'm like, it wasn't the fucking hollow body. It's a proprioceptive ability. When you transfer it to the rings, you actually haven't given them the step between those two things. And you're an asshole now because you've tried to regress them beyond what their capabilities are. But I think that, yes, the threshold required for like good form for gymnastics movements is higher, but that's typically because you get, like, you then try to do the next progression and you get booted from it because you're actually not in the positions that you need to be in. So it's basically like
it is almost self-correcting. Almost.
Well, yeah, and this is why when people are like, oh, don't let anyone do a kipping pull-up until they can do 84 strict pull-ups. I'm like, no, because you know what's going to happen when you put a beginner on the pull-up bar. They're going to try to do it and they're not going to do it. That's what's going to happen. They're not going to have a slap tear right away. They're just going to be like, oh, that didn't work. And then you're going to be like, sweet, now I have the buy-in to show you how to start doing the thing. Like, yeah. They just don't, like, they probably aren't going to break immediately. Most, like 98% of the time.
You get some idiots who have crazy high pain thresholds, and maybe they have a crazy work capacity somehow. And yeah, it's much rarer than the horror stories that we're all made out to believe.
Yeah. And while I'm on that, just because I'm annoyed about it, I will post sometimes about the active shoulder thing, because like CrossFit always teaches you that you have to be like basically as depressed through the shoulder as you can anytime you're on the rig. And the comments I will get from like physios, chiros, osteos, they're like, if you don't have a perfectly active shoulder, you'll have a slap tear. You'll end up in the physio office forever. Every patient I've ever seen, it's been because they didn't have active shoulders. I'm like, A, you actually don't know if they had active shoulders on the bar or not. You were not there. You're making a series of assumptions based on what you think you see as a pattern, but you are falsifying that pattern because there are so many other things that play into that. And B, if you go to an actual gymnastics studio, they will tell you to shrug as hard as you can. They will tell you to be in the most like elevated shoulder position anytime you're doing giants and stuff like that. I'm like, don't we think that a giant, like a full circle around the bar, basically in a handstand, a long body position, is a little bit more force than a kipping pull-up? Really?
How good is it having a platform to tell people to get fucked?
Yeah, just get fucked. That is get fucked.
Because no, I was going to wait till after the show. Well, no, I wanted to make sure that we got into some training discussion, and we'll get you back on. We'll do a full fucking episode on the gymnastics. But off air, I was going to hassle you about starting a podcast or got to get a YouTube channel cranking or something. When's long form Anna coming? Or are you lifestyle maxing? You're happy with what's going on currently, or
I'm not lifestyle maxing. I'm just client load maxing. I'm at capacity. I'm actually over capacity.
All your clients and start making long form content.
Maybe. I think there's other things in the pipeline that are currently more important, but I think that's probably like a good 2025 goal would be to start doing some slightly longer stuff. I played around with a podcast for a while. I actually have a name, structure, and format for the podcast. You can ask Niv all about it, but I just don't. I'm not in a place where I want to start doing it just yet.
Because Niv can handle the back end. He can do what Harvey does for us.
He's pretty clued up on all of that stuff.
Yeah, I just thought, it's just the YouTube channel would go so hard, I reckon. You got the lapel mic. It's honestly, I'm telling you, it's not that hard. Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah, exactly.
I think the barriers at the moment are like, I think it's part of it is like, we've discussed this, I've gotten a lot better at flexing the creative muscle for short form to the point where I'm like, I know the formula. And when my brain thinks about the long form formula, I'm like, I draw a blank. And
no, you know what the long form formula is? 3 seconds turns into 30 seconds. If I've got people giving me advice, like some of the advice for YouTube has been great, but people are like, well, you know, you've only got a short amount of time to grab people's attention. I'm like, did you see how I built my fucking platform, cunt? Like, but yeah, you've fully got like, dude, 30 seconds. I'm sometimes editing the intro to my vids. I'm like, oh, fuck. I've been yapping on for too long here. I haven't landed the plane. I'm like, I'm 8 seconds into this fucking vlog. I'm already about to make my second point. You will fucking, I'm telling you, it's the same shit. It is just, you've just got longer to do it.
Yeah. Well, and I think it will tie in well with the next like stage of stuff that I want to do business-wise. So I think it will naturally start happening, but it's just not the right time at the moment.
What's currently happening business-wise? Because I want to end recording now so I can hear about that. But talk about where people can find you. You've got a seminar coming up as well, haven't you?
I do. I'm in Melbourne in, I guess it's in like 19 days. I didn't.
This will come out before then. Yeah, this will come out before then. So when's that?
It's on the 18th of August in Melbourne and Bundoora at, I keep going to call it Bacardi Barbell Club, which is BBC, but it's Bacardi Barbell Club, Brandon's gym, my coach. So Northern Melbourne, 18th of August, it's pretty much a full day, 8:30 till 4, and we're going to cover off most like intermediate to RX level skills, so butterflies, muscle ups, handstandy stuff.
Just huge practical day. Obviously, the theory is inbuilt as a part of you experiencing that, but giving people the tools to do it themselves, coach it with confidence with their client and more confidence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No Sydney workshop?
Christmas.
Okay, sweet.
It'll probably be the 22nd of December. I've got 2 places that I might do it. I just got to figure out which one. And then I'll probably start advertising in like, I don't know, October.
Wait, when you say Christmas, how close to Christmas?
The 22nd.
Fuck. All right, we'll see.
I can't do it.
I want to take the GPP boys to Bali.
Oh,
You probably have Christmas shit on. I haven't even. I'm planning way too far ahead.
No, but the funny thing is, I'm in Bali in January, so I was planning to look into one there as well if I can sell it out.
I think Blennis is going to be in Bali around that time as well.
Oh, really?
Go click Anna's links, purchase all the necessary things. She'll be back on soon. And buy a ticket to the seminar.
Yeah, if you have questions. If you want help with content, ask Angus.
If you want access to a community of like-minded coaches, head to the notes below and join our free school community. I'm in there every week doing Q&As, and there's plenty of educational content on the way as well.